Next up, we have a adaptation of a Stephen King book, Needful Things from 1993. In the small town of Castle Rock, a mysterious shop opens, which seems to have pretty much anything that people want when they go in. Only caveat being they get it for a cheap price, but they also have to play a prank on somebody else in town, and this sort of escalates into like pure insanity and madness as the movie goes on. And we learn some things about each of these characters, at least the ones they have in the movie. Before I say anything about it, I sort of want your thoughts on this one, Chucky.
Okay, so I actually never seen this movie before. So this was the first time watch for me. And Stephen King adaptations, they're kind of hit and miss with me. Obviously, there's some that I really love, It, Carrie. But then there's also some that I don't love, and hate might be a strong word, but I think they suck. And I think Needful Things sucks.
Now, out of interest, what about it did it do it for you?
I mean, it took an hour for anything really exciting to happen, and this is like a 2-hour movie. The old guy in the movie, I mean, he was okay, like, it was sort of interesting, but at the same time, I didn't care too much about him. The premise of the movie sounded a lot more interesting before I watched it. Like, I read the plot, and I was thinking, okay, this actually sounds interesting, and let's see how it goes. And I just think they could have done it so much differently, and it turned out way differently than I was expecting. I actually usually enjoy Ed Harrison movies. Didn't really care for him in this. I can watch him in History of Violence or Glengarry Glen Ross or any of these types of movies and get some enjoyment out of his performance. But in this movie, I didn't. Playing a town sheriff, I mean, he didn't really do anything for me. I didn't really find anything enjoyable about his character.
Here's a somewhat fun fact. So he plays Sheriff Alan Pangborn, and that sheriff is actually the same guy in the movie The Doghouse, which came out the same year, which is another adaptation of a Stephen King novel. Only in that movie he's played by Michael Roque, who is a decently well-known actor. So I was confused why they couldn't just bring back Roque for this. I actually forget which one came out first since they both came out in '93. But the point being, I feel like they could have just used the same character just to give a little continuity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if they did bring back Rooker, then that might have been fine. Because I'd say out of the two actors, I prefer Rooker, but
So my biggest problem with this movie, and this may not come as a surprise to people who know my problems with Stephen King movies. Needful Things is probably one of my favorite Stephen King books. I've read it quite a few times, maybe not as many times as it, but I've read it quite a few times. In fact, the copy I have really needs to be rebought. I think it's a fantastic novel, and this adaptation is like a insult to the whole book. And I have my review, which is posted there. It has a lot of these points, but my two biggest complaints is what they do with the whole Catholic versus Baptist thing, which is a sort of a small subplot in the movie, and the character of Buster Keaton. And I'll just make both of these short. In the novel, the Baptist versus Catholic thing eventually leads to an all-out brawl between like members of the Catholic congregation and the Baptist congregation. They just meet in the middle of a street and have this all-out fight. It's like butcher knives. It's a bloody fight. And it's just brutal. That happens sort of near the end of the novel, and so many other things are going on. There's no police to stop it. And in this movie, this is like a 1-minute punch out between the Catholic priest and the Baptist guy, and I don't know, it sort of took away all the power from that really, religiously charged conflict, and it just almost felt like a parody of what the book did. And the thing about Keaton, and if you've seen this movie, he's he's I think a decently memorable character, played by J.T. Walsh. This movie almost makes him out to be like toward the end, he almost comes across as like a heroic type guy. Like, hey, you screwed me over, now I'm going to get my revenge and blow you up. Which, again, in the book, I don't want to spoil the ending, of course, because I encourage you to read it if you've not already. But in the book, he has, in my opinion, a much more sort of reasonable ending with his character. I mean, just like in the movie, 5 minutes before that, he like killed his wife with a hammer, and now he's like becoming the hero of the movie. Like, all that Ed Harris did was give a rousing speech, and I'm sorry, but that's not enough. So I don't know. It just really bothered me. They sort of changed the ending of this a bit, and there's one thing I liked about the ending, but the whole fact that like Buster Keaton did the final big, blowout, and it doesn't really mean much. It just, I don't know. It just almost seems pointless in my opinion.
Yeah. I personally don't have a whole lot to say about the movie. I just thought it was really unenjoyable. And
how do you feel about the kid's attempted suicide? I've got to go to hell now.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's something else that bothered me. This seems, based on what I'm reading, this actually came out in theaters, it looks like. But this seems like a TV movie in my opinion. I don't know, the acting seems a bit off, the production doesn't seem particularly gold. I mean, I know they have a few big names, but it doesn't seem to mean much because the movie sucks. And I feel like with the source material, they could have done so much more. Like, they could have done so much more with this if they had just, I don't know, maybe like an HBO series or something would do this justice. But as a 2-hour movie, and actually, it's worth noting, and you may have read this too, there actually was a 3-hour version of this movie that was aired on, I think it was TNT, and they added like a bunch of extra scenes with a few smaller characters. So, and that version has, I don't think, been released on DVD. There's some legal issues with it, but that version might be marginally better than this one.
I don't know if I want to spend another extra hour watching this movie.
But see, if I didn't really look for it, I just watched what I could easily get to. Mainly because I knew, now I've seen this one before and I knew I didn't like it, so I just tried to get it done with. But I don't know, if you want, like, I guess the full experience, if you can try to find the 3-hour version, that might be worth looking into.
I can't say I'm going to be looking for it.
The issue with this movie is, since I've read the book, I found so many, things in this movie, some of them somewhat small, some of them somewhat big. Like, they left whole characters out that I thought were really interesting or important. The ending of the novel feels so much more epic than this. I mean, in the novel, Brian, who's the sort of young boy who starts this whole chain, he has a younger brother in the novel, and there's sort of some interesting characterization going on there. And it just leaves out so much, and it's only a 2-hour movie, and it's like something like a 750-page book. And oh god, now that I think about it, what they do with Pangborn, the main sheriff, played by Ed Harris, one of the most important character traits in the book is the fact that his wife and child died like the previous, I forget if it's a year, and they just completely take that out in the movie, and he's just a sheriff from a big city, and it just, I didn't get it. That was a big point of Pangborn's character, and it just bothered me. I just don't care for this, and I know that this has an okay rating on like quite a few sites, but I don't see it. I give this one a 3 out of 10.
Yeah. I also give it a 3 out of 10. Woo! We're so in sync. No, I just, it had an interesting premise. I guess that's more due to Stephen King than anything to do with this actual movie. Because the movie itself, I thought it was pretty boring. The further it went along, the less and less interested I was in it. And it took so long for something to really happen for a 2-hour movie. Yeah, it didn't do anything for me. And yeah, so like I said, it's probably very tough to come across any Stephen King related thing and not say it sounds interesting. But clearly, translating a novel to screen takes some special talent, and whatever was needed there is not applied here. So I guess, all I can say is watching this movie is not a needful thing.
That was horrible. But not as bad as this movie.